it'll make better sense to you. We put this bridge up as a bridge of hope on Easter, and I want to say there is hope when it comes to the family. There is hope when it comes to our nation. And I know we hear doomsdayers say our nation has no hope, our nation, the next generation, it's gone. Let me tell you something. The generation of millennials and the Gen Zs today, the ones that just graduated, are some of the most passionate, energetic individuals and generations that's ever lived in America. I totally am convinced that our young generation today of the Gen Zs and the millennial, I do believe that they, when their passion is right and directed in the correct way, I think our nation can turn around and we will lead the world again in every area of America. I believe in our next generation. I was having a conversation with my son-in-law who worked in youth ministry for years, and a year or two ago we were having a conversation, and I was kind of joining in with some of the other critics blasting the millennials. And it's fun to blast other generations, right? And he looked at me and he says, well, I got to ask you a question. And I said, sure, what's your question? And he said, well, who do you think made the millennial generation like they are? I said, you're a smart aleck. I said, what do you mean? He said, well, who made them like they are? Wouldn't you agree that it was their parents? Yes. But that's beside the point. And we got into a great conversation. As a pastor, I talk to a lot of people. I talk to a lot of people who get diagnosed with terminal illness, a lot of them on their deathbed, and I've heard them say a lot of things. But what I've never heard a person say is, boy, I wish I could have made more money. I wish I could have got a guy that owned a little bit more property, owned a few more things, or I wish I could have got a little bit higher up the corporate ladder. I never hear people say that. That's never been once. But what I do hear them say oftentimes over and over again is, I wish I'd have spent more time with my children, with the spouse, with family. And then they all end up by saying, I wish I'd have spent more time focused on my relationship with God. Let me tell you, you don't have to wait until your deathbed to realize how important your family is. Listen to what one father said, whose children were grown and they were out of the house. He looked back and here's what he wrote. He said, my family's all grown and the kids are all gone. But if I had to do it all over again, this is what I'd do. I would love my wife more in front of my children. I would laugh with my children more at our mistakes and our joys. I'd listen more, even to the littlest child. I'd be more honest about my own weaknesses to my kids and never pretending perfection. I'd pray differently for my family. Instead of focusing on them, I'd focus on me. I'd do more things together with my children. I would encourage them more and bestow more praise on them. I'd pay more attention to the little things like deeds and words of thoughtfulness. And he concludes, if I had it to do all over again, I would share God more intimately with my family. Every ordinary thing that happened in every ordinary day, I would use those things to direct them to God. You see, when the dust settles and it's all said and done, and when we look back on our accomplishments in life, the family is going to be the most important part of our life. I mean, you can look at a successful career and you can look at other accomplishment, but it's our children that's going to carry on our legacy and our name to the next generation. Some of the greatest accomplishments in our life will be the next generation. And I want you, let's take a few moments and look at Ephesians chapter 6, verses 1 through 4. The book of Ephesians about relationships, and this one focuses right here on the family. It says, children, obey your parents in the Lord, for this is right. Honor your father and mother, which is the first commandment with a promise, so that it may go well with you and that you may enjoy a long life on this earth. And then he goes on in verse 4, fathers, do not exasperate or don't provoke your children. Instead, bring them up in the training and the instruction of the Lord. I'll share with you just 4 things real quickly this morning. Number 1 is we can learn from our kids, and this scripture helps us see it, is that kids need to learn their biblical duties of obedience and honor. Kids have to learn those things. They don't just grow up, they don't just come into this world knowing how to obey and how to honor. They don't just come into this world and do that. In fact, if you had a toddler, any of you ever said no to a toddler? I mean, you have to say no to a toddler early in age. You say, do not run out of this yard. Don't go in the road. And what do? They do it. They go in the road. Don't touch this hot stove because it'll burn you. What do? They touch it. So we don't have to, if they're going to learn obedience and respect and honor, we have to teach them. That's a learned attitude and it's a learned behavior. They don't just come into this world having it. In fact, they have the opposite of it. I see this out on the sports field all the time, refereeing football or officiating as an umpire on the sports field. I see and I hear kids say and do things all the time, and I look around and I think, oh my goodness, where did they learn to say and to respond to authority in that way? Any of you ever seen young people have a problem with authority? Let me see your hand. Where do you think they learned it? I had a teenager one time, we were doing a football game, and he was working the chains. It was a sub-varsity game. This dad is yelling out stuff. He's yelling it out to the coaches, because all dads know how to coach better than the football coach, even though he's a professional. They know how to referee better. This dad yells out stuff, and I'm sitting there, and I'm just looking ahead. Because, we're not supposed to react, but we sometimes hear. This teenage boy, he played varsity football. He looked at me and he said, sir, do you hear that? I said, yes. Never looked at him. Why? I said, do you hear it? Yes, sir. I said, well, what do you think? I said, kind of disrespectful? Yes, sir. Very disrespectful. I said, well, good for you, son. And I said, well, what else you think about it? Sounds kind of stupid, huh? He said, really stupid. I said, well, now don't go tell your buddy that his dad's stupid, but he is saying some stupid stuff, right? Yeah. Even a high school teenager recognized that this grown man that ought to know better, that ought to know respect, and ought to know honor, and ought to know obedience, is absolutely making a fool of himself. Now, where do the kids on the football field learn to be disrespectful? See, we have to teach them. We have to teach them about obedience. We have to teach them about honor and respect. And what we say around lunch, when we're talking about people or individuals or groups, they pick up on our attitude and they pick up on the words we say. We might not have been the one yelling out something that was really dumb for all the stands to hear. We might be saying it in our living room or at our dining room table. But we're teaching them how to respect and honor other people. I'm going to go back to what my son-in-law asked me. He said, well, where do you think that generation learned it? Learn it from us. And so I'm going to say to you that are graduates and becoming adults, I'm not going to give you a get out of jail card, pass go for free. You're old enough to know right and wrong. And I don't care what your family is. I don't care what your background of origin is. It doesn't matter. Once you get to a certain place of understanding, and at this place, you know right and wrong. It's your responsibility, and you can't pass the buck to your parents or lack of. So they need to learn obedience, and they need to learn honor, and that's what the Scripture tells us. Now, here's a good question I've been asked a lot. At what point does a child stop obeying their parents? Any biblical idea? Well, in America, if you're 16, they say you're old enough to get a driver's license. In America, if you're 18, you're old enough to vote and to serve in the military. In America, if you're 21, you're old enough, mature enough to drink alcohol. So what point, if the Scripture says to you, obey your parents and honor them, at what point do you not have to obey them anymore? Well, biblically, as best I can understand it, and scholars understand it, children are to obey their parents until they're under a different authority, meaning they're married. That's when the Scripture changes authority. So you say, well, wait a minute, I'm 18 years old, I got to obey my parents? Well, that's what I can find in Scripture. I can't find any other time change until there's marriage. And then even after we're married, we're still under the authority of our parents. The authority shifts to a counsel role. And I'll tell you this today, I'm just north of 39. We did celebrate Brad Street's 60th birthday a couple of weeks ago. We all sang happy birthday to him at the restaurant. A little bit north. But to this day, if we're making a big decision, we're praying, and we go to our parents and say, here's the situation, how do you see it working? Because we believe that God speaks through parents to this very day. Well, that's enough. Kids need to learn their biblical duties and obedience, and of honor and obedience. Secondly, kids need their parents. Kids need their parents. There was a Harvard University sociologist study that they wanted to determine whether 5- and 6-year-olds would become delinquent. So they created this study and they created this test, and the test that they used on these 5- and 6-year-old children proved to be 90% accurate of becoming delinquent. And here's what they said they found were 4 primary factors necessary to prevent juvenile delinquency. Now listen, this Harvard study said this. Number 1, the father's firm, fair, and consistent discipline. Number 2, the mother's supervision and companionship during the day. Third, the parents demonstrating affection for each other and for their children. And fourth, the family spending time together in activities where all participate. There was another study that was done, and he said the higher probability of children using drugs, wrongfully using drugs, it's higher among families where they do not sit at the dinner table and have a family meal together during the week. It's higher. So the joke in my family is, I said, when I came across that, we had always tried to have at least one meal as a family at the dinner table. And so when I came across that, I shared with my kids. And so to this day, my kid says, well, Dad, you did a good job. You kept us off drugs. We ate once a week. Here's what the studies tell us, guys. It tells us, it affirms what the Bible teaches. Not that the Bible needs affirmation, but it just supports what the Bible teaches. And some people are just learning it. Your kids need you, not just in the early years, but throughout their years in life. You're impacting them and you're making a difference. They need an on-hand mom and the active involvement of a father. And the concept of quality time is nothing more than a myth. Remember when they came out with that? Well, I don't have quantity time, but I'm going to spend quality time. That's a bunch of hog stuff. People need time. Children need time. It's quantity as well as quality. They need our involvement with them. Even if it's just watching them at a football game or a baseball game or watching them at one of the boringest events that my kids ever participated in school. I would go and watch track meets. 3.5 hours in the bleachers to watch them compete for 62 seconds. But you know what? I wouldn't miss it. Because those 62 seconds were a lifetime for them. And the other 2.5 or 3 hours was so what? Scripture gives an imperative in Ephesians there. It uses the word fathers are to teach and instruct. All the scholars and the language experts of the Greek agree that that word could be used, translated, parents. So what I'm saying to you is, moms, I'm not letting you off the hook. But they said that the reason they think that was translated that way is because it seems as though parents are much more, moms are much more apt to be involved in the parenting, and the dads are much more apt to be less involved. And we have a problem in America. They call it the absentee father syndrome. And it's not because dads are gone. It's because dads are at home and still gone, mentally and emotionally. You know what that passage says? Parents take charge, instruct. Let me tell you what that scripture says really simple. When I read that, it's pretty easy, even in the English. I don't have to know Greek. It says that in a family, the parents are in charge, not the children. I know that's contrary to culture. My firstborn Carl was born. I was working at a church down in Cleveland, actually at First Baptist. I would go in every day dragging. My eyes were closed. I'd drink 2 or 3 pots of coffee. I tried to do it intravenously, any way I could do it to get caffeine. After about 3 months, I come in, and Keith, the pastor, he said, Phil, what is wrong with you? I said, man, I'm tired. You got 4 kids. You know what it is to have a kid at home. And he said, well, what's going on with Carl? He's a baby. And I said, well, he doesn't want to go to sleep until 11:30 at night, 11 to 11:30 at night. And so we're up with him till 11:30. And then we put him to bed. And so we spend an hour together every night, because if we don't get any opportunity to talk. And I said, so we stay up to 12:30 every night in 1 hour. Is that just Jennifer and I? And he looked at me and he said, can I ask you? He said, well, he didn't ask me if he could ask me a question. He said, well, who's in charge in your house? I said, what do you mean? I'm in charge. I'm the boss. Well, as long as Jennifer lets me, but I'm the boss. And he said, well, it doesn't sound like it. I said, what do you mean? He said, sounds like Carl's running your household. I walked away and I was so mad. I was furious. I said, no, he's not. I am. He just smiled and he said, believe whatever you want. And I walked away mad. I'll tell you what we did. We started putting Carl to bed early. We started spending our time in the evening, and I was in bed when we wanted to. not when he wanted to. Powerful lesson. My son was only 2 months old. I need to take charge. The moms and dads, God put you in the family to be in charge. And there's a reason. Children don't have the intelligence, the experience, or the reasoning abilities to make decisions as they're growing up. And that's why you're there, to make those decisions. It's your job. Not to be their buddy, not to be their best friend, but to be their parent. And if you love them, you ought to do what's best for them, not what feels good and convenient for you. Because it is easier to say yes or give in to what the kid wants. It's easier. It's hard to walk away with them laying on the floor screaming and kicking and yelling and you're embarrassed. Any ever done that? I did in church. Rachel, oh my goodness, my oldest daughter, man, she could throw a fit. Her husband says she still can. We'd walk out of that Sunday school room and that preschool, and Jennifer would say, I am so embarrassed. I said, just act like she's not ours. While I'm here, I just got to ask this question. I hadn't got this figured out yet. Why is it that when it comes to school, baseball practice, football practice, that if our kids said, hey, Mom, Dad, I don't think I want to go to school anymore. I'm done. Hey, 4 years, that's enough. 4th grade, who needs it? Parents say what? Well, you're going to go back to school. Because it's not an option, right? So can I ask you a question? Why do we become a parent on things like academics, sports, music? But when it comes to the things of God, we allow children to be the parent. Why do we let kids decide that they can go to church or not? You let them do that at school? You let them do that with sports practice or band or music? Whatever, just name it. No, you don't. Why do we rise up and be the parent on things that don't last for an eternity, but when it comes to things of eternity, of what's the most important thing in all the world, why do we let them make the choices when they're not mature enough yet and they're still a child? I don't get it. I really don't. I don't understand it. Why is academics and why is education more important than a relationship with God? Why do kids choose if they go to vacation Bible school or not? Why do children choose if they go to camp or not? I don't understand that. I really don't. Now, I'm still learning. But I don't understand why we let kids make choices, their own choices, when it comes to spiritual things. And when it comes to things that don't last forever, we get in there and make those decisions. Well, number 3. Kids need a village to raise them. Sure is getting quiet. A village. Remember back in the Old Testament times or in the biblical days or even in some of your days back when you were young, way back in early America, you know, Dalton, back when you were a kid, right? Who raised you? I've heard stories about you guys raising up here in this town of Coldspring. Who raised you? Everybody did. When you got in trouble, did you get in trouble first by your mom or dad? You probably got in trouble there because of a neighbor or a cousin or a grandma or something. And then when you got home, you got what? You got in trouble again, right? And in the biblical days, and in even early America, it was our immediate family, mom and dad, and we had siblings involved, and we had grandparents involved, cousins and aunts and uncles. When my wife and I got married, and she said in Mississippi, she said, "Phil, is everybody in Mississippi your aunt and uncle?" Because I call them aunt and uncle if they're older than us. We just did. I said, "Well, I don't know the difference." Because I knew if I got in trouble by any of them, I could be in trouble. I'm going to tell you, it takes a village to raise kids. I'm going to tell you, it's no different. In fact, I think it takes more people to raise children today than it did in early America. Because they're hammered with more ungodly information, more so today than ever. We need the church raising our kids. I'd tell my kids something. I'd teach them things. I'd teach them something. I'll never forget. All four of my kids did this. They would come home one night, different times, and they would say, "Dad, do you know what so-and-so taught me, or what we learned in our Bible study, or what we taught?" The first time I said, "They didn't teach you that. I told you that 100 times. I finally just said, "Get over it. Swallow your pride, Phil. What really matters is what? That they get it." So they would come home and say, "Dad, Mr. Steve taught me this. Miss Tammy taught me that." And I'd say, "Really?" They'd walk out of the room. I'd say, "Well, that's awesome." Walk out of the room, and I'd say, "Jennifer, how many times have we had that conversation?" I don't know why, but sometimes we can speak till we're blue in the face and kids can't hear it, but someone else can say it and the lights go off. We need one another. More than ever, the church. And it doesn't matter if they're biological or not, if they're in the church family, they're our family. We need to help them. The fourth thing, wrap this up. Kids need an environment that is nurturing. You see, our families need to be homes that foster healthy development. Because once it's over, and we cannot regain that time again. We can't go back and fix things, and that's why parents should take the time now to do everything they can to impact their children. Establish parameters for them. Give them discipline because they need parental leadership. They may resist it at times, but they'll be grateful for it later. I'm learning as a grandparent now of a 3-year-old and an 18-month-old how that I do give them candy when they want it. And I do let them do things that I wouldn't dare want them to do if I was a parent. It's easier being a granddad, I'm going to just tell you. But at the same time, we still have parameters and we have boundaries. And we've got to help with that, and we've got to teach them that. And we've got to create that environment, though, that's nurturing so that they can grow. We had a tomato plant a few years back. Our friends had a tomato plant, bought them at the same place. His tomato plant produced so many tomatoes that the tree would fall over, and it never got more than this tall, and it just was all over the place. Our tomato plant got this tall. It was 6 foot. It produced one little bitty tomato. Now why? Got them in the same place, you know why? Because our friends created a better environment so that it would be productive, healthy, nutrition. We gave it water and hopefully the right amount of sun, but we never thought about giving it the right nutrition. We just thought it ought to grow. Some things are taught at home and some things are caught. Some things are given by instruction and other things are caught by example. And children will observe their parents and they want to know what their priorities are and what is important to them. It isn't teaching children through rigid, unbending dogmatism, but it's through explanation and example. And that starts in a parent's own relationship with God. So the question for all of us as parents and grandparents and those of us who are part of the big village here, the question is, are you setting an example for the younger generation? Do you need to make some changes in your life so that you can be an effective example and leader? You see, it shouldn't be our goal to mold our children into our image, but our goal should be to mold them into the image of God. They're not ours to keep. They're ours to nurture. And we're not to teach them to be dependent on us for the rest of their lives, but rather we ought to teach them to be interdependent and, more importantly, dependent on God. Let me give you real quick 5 crucial elements of an environment that's nurturing. Unconditional love and acceptance. Love given regardless of their behavior is unconditional. And they will learn much from their parents and from their family how to resolve conflict and how to forgive. And we got to do that. Words and deeds that build up are essential. Ephesians 4:29 says we should never speak a word that doesn't build up the other. Now, folks, I'm going to just tell you, if you use sarcasm to communicate with your 5- and 6-year-old especially, stop it. They don't get it. Much less adults. But we ought to build them up. We got to have boundaries with freedom. They need rules and boundaries. In fact, they tell us that children without rules and boundaries have a higher issues of security and self-esteem. That rules and boundaries give them a sense of security. My oldest daughter, Rachel, she got married. She was off. She comes back about 6 or 7 months later, and she said, "Dad, I got to apologize to you. We were out on a trail ride." I said, "Why, Rachel? What did you do?" And she said, "Well, you had all these rules, and we had to go by these boundaries in school and raising us." And she said, "I just want to apologize today that sometimes I had a bad attitude. But I just want to say, Dad, thank you for having boundaries." Because we work with students today that have families with no boundaries, and I see the insecurities and the dysfunction that those children have. They need protection, not isolation. Learn to allow your child to fail and experience pain. Life is that way. So stop running in and bailing them out all the time. Let them have an opportunity to learn from their mistakes and work out their problems, because one day they're going to be an adult and they're going to have to do that. So let them measure it. But they're young now. It's like my father-in-law and I were talking about with our kids. He says, "Well, we were talking about one of our kids, and he said, well, think about it this way. 19, 20 years old, if they make the bad career choice today, at 19, what difference does it make? They got their whole life to recoup. So learn to let them make mistakes. And then lastly, they need models to see and copy. Children learn more, and it doesn't matter what age the child is, by what they see more than what they simply hear through lecture. We can only expect the next generation to love God as they see us loving God. I'm a defender and a champion of the next generation. If you hadn't learned that, you need to just know. But I think that we need to quit blasting and criticizing and asking the question, am I the model that they need to see so that they can become what I want them to become? Because if I'm not there, how can we expect them to be there ourselves? But Scripture has a lot to say about the family. We have a lot that we can learn from our kids. Let's pray. Father, thank you for loving us. And I don't know how your word may be speaking in hearts today. I know, Lord, that when I look at this text, I want to go back and redo, but I can't. But the good news is I can do something from today forward. To help us as grandparents, as parents, as members of the village, to help our hearts be where it needs to be, so that we can impact in a positive way the next generation. I pray in your name, Jesus. Amen. Deacons and Dalton and I are going to be here, and we'll be here to pray with you. We're going to stand and sing this invitation, and I don't know how God may want to lead you to pray or be a part of the church family. We're here. We'll pray with you. You come at this time. Let's sing this song together. As a parent, I don't know what's right for you in your home. I don't know. I'm going to be the first to tell you, I have no idea how to make decisions in your home and what it needs to look like. Because we all have to kind of figure that out, right? And I wish it was easier than it is. But I hope that as we've looked at some scripture, if nothing else, my heart wanted to raise the question, what can we do better? Because we've not been doing a good job with the next generation. What can we do better? Because they are the hope of today. Let's, ushers, if you would come and have our offering. If you're a guest, drop your welcome card in the plate, and you don't have to feel obligated to give financially at all.
Father God, we just thank you for today. Thank you for the reminder and the words that we've heard, only about being a parent. Lord, and how we can, even if our kids are grown or even if we don't have kids, Lord, how we can encourage, how we can be a community and a family as a body of believers, and how we can love and be patient and encourage one another, and be responsible, be examples. Lord, so we all have a part to play, and Lord, we also know what it is to be a child of a loving Father that is patient and long-suffering and gives us unconditional love. And Lord, we thank you so much for that. We love you in Jesus' name.
Father,